3 days passed in the gravity cell, and Yuna had become something the Vorthak scientists had never seen before. While other prisoners were broken and begging for mercy, she was getting stronger. Every time they increased the gravity, she adapted, faster than their computers could measure. Dr. Krim stood in the observation room watching her through the reinforced window that looked into her cell. His assistants gathered around him looking at data screens that showed impossible readings. The human was not just surviving the gravity torture she was learning from it. "Look at these measurements," Dr. Krim said, pointing at a graph. "The subject's muscle density has increased by 12% in just 3 days. Her bone structure is actually getting thicker under the gravitational stress. This should not be possible." Yuna was doing exercises in her cell, moving smoothly, even when the gravity was set to 10 times normal strength. She had figured out that the aliens were following a pattern with their tests. Every 12 minutes, the gravity would cycle through different levels, always ending with a brief return to normal. During these normal gravity periods, she had been working on something the aliens could not see from their observation post. She had discovered that one of the metal support beams in the wall was slightly loose. The constant changing gravity had stressed the metal until small cracks appeared. She worked on the beam carefully, using her body to hide what she was doing from the cameras. The aliens thought she was just resting against the wall during the normal gravity periods. In reality, she was slowly working the metal beam back and forth until the cracks grew bigger. The beam was about 3 feet long and made of some kind of alien metal that was very heavy and very hard. If she could get it loose, it would make an excellent weapon. But more importantly, she had an idea about how to use the gravity cell itself as part of her escape plan guard. Captain Thek came to see the human who would not break. He brought other guards with him to show them what human prisoners looked like when they refused to surrender. The guards made betting sounds about how long she would last before her mind snapped. "Look at this creature," Thek said in the alien language that Yuna was starting to understand. Still moving after 72 hours in the gravity chamber, most species are dead by now or begging for death. But Yuna was not thinking about death. She was thinking about physics and timing, and the exact moment when she would turn from prisoner into predator. She had memorized everything about the cell, the camera positions, the timing of the gravity cycles, the weak points in the construction. Most importantly, she had figured out how the gravity control system worked by listening to the sounds it made. The machinery was located directly above her cell, and she could hear the generators powering up before each gravity change. There was a brief moment during system recalibration when the gravity dropped to exactly normal levels for 30 seconds. During those 30 seconds, she would have normal strength and mobility while still having access to the loose metal beam. Once she pulled it free, she would need to wait for the next gravity spike to use it as a projectile. The aliens had taught her to weaponize gravity itself. Dr. Krim's assistant was getting nervous about the readings. "Sir, the subject's brain activity suggests she is planning something. Should we increase security measures?" Dr. Krim looked at the data and shook his head. "Impossible. She is locked in an escape-proof cell under constant gravitational stress. No prisoner has ever escaped from Block 7. The human is probably just trying to maintain sanity through mental exercises, but Yuna was not trying to maintain sanity. She was planning the complete destruction of everyone who had underestimated her species. The aliens thought humans were just another weak species to be captured and studied. They had no idea they were dealing with creatures who became more dangerous when cornered. On the morning of the 4th day, something changed in her cell routine. The gravity cycles became more intense, reaching 15 times normal strength, then 20 times. The aliens were probably trying to find her absolute breaking point. They wanted to see exactly how much pressure a human could survive. What they did not understand was that every increase in gravity was making her plan more deadly. The metal beam was now completely loose, held in place only by her careful positioning. When the gravity spiked to maximum, the beam would become a projectile moving with incredible force. She had calculated the angles and timing perfectly. The observation window where Dr. Krim stood was directly in line with her position. If she released the beam at exactly the right moment during a maximum gravity spike, it would punch through the reinforced glass like a bullet through paper. The aliens had spent 4 days teaching her to use their own technology as a weapon. They had shown her the exact timing of their systems and the exact positions of their weak points. They thought they were conducting scientific research. Instead, they had created the perfect conditions for their own destruction. Una positioned herself carefully against the wall, with the loose beam hidden behind her body. The next gravity cycle was beginning, and she could hear the generators powering up above her cell. This would be the moment when Prisoner became Predator, and the Vorthak learned what happened when they pushed humans too far. The gravity slammed down at 20 times normal force. Instead of fighting against it, Una used it. She released the metal beam at the exact moment the gravitational field reached maximum intensity. Physics did the rest. The transport ship carrying Una and dozens of other prisoners flew through space for 3 days before reaching Vorthak Prime. The homeworld of the alien empire was a dark red planet covered in metal cities and smoke from giant factories. Una watched through a small window as they landed at what looked like the biggest prison she had ever seen. The detention facility was built into the side of a mountain. It had tall walls made of black metal and towers with bright searchlights that moved back and forth across the ground. Hundreds of alien guards patrolled the walls, carrying weapons that looked like they could cut through anything. The place was designed to make prisoners feel small and hopeless. They dragged Una and the other captives off the transport ship in chains. The air outside smelled like burning metal and chemicals that made her nose hurt. Other prisoners coughed and wheezed, but Una tried to breathe as little as possible. She did not want alien poison in her lungs. The prison entrance was a massive gate that opened with grinding sounds like a giant mouth. The walls inside were covered with strange alien writing that probably told prisoners all the ways they could be punished or killed. The floor was made of cold metal that echoed with every footstep. Processing was like being treated as a piece of cargo. They took pictures of Una from every angle. They scanned her body with machines that beeped and flashed. They took samples of her blood and hair. She did not resist because she was still learning about this place. She needed to understand how it worked before she could figure out how to break it. A tall alien in a white coat examined her like she was an interesting bug under a microscope. His nameplate said Dr. Krim in both alien writing and human letters. He spoke better human language than the guards, but his voice still sounded wrong, fascinating. He said, looking at readings on a small screen, "Human female age approximately 20. 8 years. Military training evident from muscle development and scars. This one should provide excellent research." Data Una stared at him without saying anything. She had learned in pilot training that sometimes staying quiet was the best weapon. The aliens wanted her to be scared. They wanted her to beg or cry or ask questions. When she gave them nothing, it made them uncomfortable. Dr. Krim made notes on his device, then looked at her again. Human specimen, 4,000. 840. 7 will be placed in detention block. 7 Level 12 for initial testing. We will begin with gravity tolerance experiments tomorrow. 2 guards led Yuna deeper into the prison through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered, with cameras and sensors that watched every move. The lights were dim and red, which made everything look like it was covered in blood. Many doors lined the hallways, and she could hear strange sounds coming from behind them. Finally, they reached a section marked with alien symbols that probably meant something terrible. They stopped at a heavy door that had no windows. The guards opened it and pushed Yuna inside. The door slammed shut behind her with a sound like thunder. The cell was small and empty, except for a metal bench built into one wall. There was no toilet or sink, just a small drain in the floor and a slot in the door where they could pass food. The walls were covered with scratches made by previous prisoners. Some looked like they were trying to keep track of days. Others looked like desperate attempts to dig through solid metal. But the strangest thing about the cell was how it felt. Something was wrong with the gravity. It was not quite normal, like she was on a planet that was slightly smaller than Earth. She felt a little lighter than she should. Everything seemed to float for just a moment longer. When she moved, a voice came from speakers hidden in the walls. "Welcome to Gravity Cell Block." 7. The voice said in perfect human language, "You are now part of our research program into the effects of variable gravitational fields on different species." The gravity in Yuna's cell suddenly became much stronger. She felt like she weighed 3 times more than normal. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the floor hard. The metal bench that had seemed normal now felt impossibly heavy when she tried to grab it. Most prisoners would panic at this point. They would scream or beg or try to pound on the door. But Yuna had trained on high-gravity worlds during her military service. She knew how to move when everything weighed more. She slowly got to her hands and knees, then pushed herself up. The gravity got even stronger. Now she felt like she weighed 5 times normal. Her bones creaked under the pressure. Her muscles burned with the effort of just standing, but she stayed on her feet. She remembered her drill instructor shouting at recruits who complained about heavy gravity training. Now she understood why that training had been so important. You will remain under increased gravitational stress until we have collected sufficient data. The voice said, "Most subjects lose consciousness within 10 minutes. We will monitor your vital signs and adjust." Accordingly, Yuna gritted her teeth and took a step forward. It felt like walking through thick mud while carrying a heavy pack, but she could do it. The aliens watching her probably expected her to collapse, but humans were tougher than they looked. Humans had evolved on a world with stronger gravity than most other species dealt with. She took another step, then another. Soon she was walking slowly around the small cell. The gravity was crushing, but not impossible. Her military training had prepared her for worse conditions than this. She had once done combat exercises under 8 times normal gravity. The gravity suddenly dropped back to normal, and Yuna almost fell over from the sudden change. She caught herself against the wall and realized something important. The aliens were not just torturing her, they were testing her. They wanted to know exactly how much gravity a human could handle. That gave her an idea. If they were testing her limits, she could use that against them. She could make them think she was weaker than she really was. She could learn their patterns and find ways to turn their own experiments into weapons. The voice came back online again. Subject shows unusual resistance to gravitational stress, increasing intensity for next test cycle. This time, the gravity slammed down even harder. Yuna dropped to one knee but forced herself to keep moving. She started doing push-ups against the crushing force. Each one was agony, but she did them anyway. The aliens wanted data. She would give them data that would confuse and frustrate them. Hours passed with the gravity changing from normal to crushing. And back again, Yuna began to understand the pattern. The aliens were following some kind of schedule, testing different levels of gravity for different amounts of time. She memorized the timing and started to prepare her body for each change. Other prisoners in nearby cells were not doing as well. She could hear crying and screaming through the walls. Some begged for mercy in languages she did not understand. Others made sounds that were not quite human anymore. The gravity torture was breaking their minds as well as their bodies, but Yuna was different. She had been broken before in military training and had learned to put herself back together. She had faced death in space battles and survived. She had lost friends and learned to keep fighting anyway. The aliens thought they were breaking her, but they were actually making her stronger by the end of the first day. She was moving almost normally, even under the crushing gravity. The monitoring equipment must have been showing readings the aliens did not expect, because Dr. Krim came to observe her personally through a hidden camera. Impossible, he muttered to his assistant. This human shows adaptation rates far beyond normal parameters. Yuna smiled as she heard his words. The aliens were starting to realize they had underestimated their prisoner. They thought they had caught a helpless victim. Instead, they had trapped a predator who was learning to use their own cage as a weapon. The Vorthak had made their second mistake by showing her their most advanced torture device. Soon they would learn that some cages were not strong enough to hold what they were meant to contain. The space around Mining Station Alpha was filled with fire and metal pieces floating in the darkness. Yuna Kim pressed her face against the small window of her fighter ship and watched her friends die one by one. The alien ships were too fast and too many. Her team had tried their best, but the Vorthak Empire was winning this battle. Yuna's ship shook hard as another enemy blast hit her hull. The lights went out for a moment, then came back on, but dimmer than before. Her engine was making bad. Sounds and smoke was coming from the control panel. She knew her ship was dying. She had maybe 10 minutes before it stopped working completely. She tried to call her squadron leader, but only heard static on the radio. The other human ships were either destroyed or running away. She was alone now, floating in space with nowhere to go. The nearest human base was 6 days away, and her ship would not last 6 hours. The Vorthak ships were getting closer. They looked like giant metal insects with sharp edges and glowing red lights. She had seen these ships before in the war, but never this close. They were bigger than she thought and much more scary. Each one was 3 times the size of her fighter. Yuna had been a pilot for 8 years. She had fought in 12 battles against different alien races, but the Vorthak were different. They did not just want to win. They wanted to capture humans alive. She had heard stories about what happened to humans in Vorthak prisons. The stories were not good. Her radar showed 5 enemy ships coming toward her. She counted her weapons. 2 plasma missiles and half power in her laser cannon. Not enough to fight 5 ships, but maybe enough to take 1 or 2 with her. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her mother who made the best soup. Her little brother who wanted to be a pilot like her. The first Vorthak ship was now very close. She could see strange symbols on its hull and small windows where alien faces looked out at her. One of them was pointing at her ship and talking to others. She could not hear what they were saying, but she knew they were planning how to capture her. Yuna put her hand on the self-destruct button. Every human ship had one. It was better to die than be captured by the Vorthak. But something made her stop. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just stubbornness. Her grandmother always said the Kim family never gave up without a fight. The Vorthak ship shot something at her, but it was not a weapon. It was some kind of net made of energy. The net wrapped around her ship, and she could not move. The engines stopped working. The weapons stopped working. Even the lights went out. She was trapped like a fish in a net more. Vorthak ships came close to her. Her radio suddenly worked. Again. But now, alien voices were talking. She heard deep growling sounds and clicking noises. She did not understand their language, but the meaning was clear. They had caught another human. A large ship came near her fighter. It was 10 times bigger than her small ship. She watched as a metal tube came out of the big ship and attached to her hull. There was a loud bang as the tube connected. Then she heard cutting sounds as they made a hole in her ship. Yuna grabbed her sidearm and checked the power cell. It was full. She would not make this easy for them. The air in her ship was getting thin because of the hole they made. She put on her helmet and waited. The cutting stopped. There was silence for a moment. Then the hole opened, and 3 tall figures came through. They wore dark armor and had weapons that glowed with blue light. Their faces looked like lizards, but bigger and with more teeth. One of them was clearly the leader because the others waited for him to move first. The leader looked at Yuna for a long time. His eyes were yellow like a cat's, but bigger and meaner. He said something in his alien language, then tried to speak in human words. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "You are human female soldier." "Yes," the leader said. His words sounded wrong, like he was not used to speaking human language. "You fight good, but now you come with us." Yuna pointed her weapon at him, but 3 alien weapons pointed back at her. She was brave, but not stupid. 3 against 1 was not good odds, especially when their weapons looked much more powerful than hers. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. The leader made a sound that might have been laughing. "Research facility. You are a valuable specimen. Human warriors very interesting." To study, Yuna felt cold fear in her stomach. She had heard about Vorthak research facilities. Humans went in, but different things came out. Things that used to be human but were changed in horrible ways. The aliens liked to experiment on other species, to learn how they worked. She thought about fighting anyway. Maybe she could kill one of them before they killed her. But then she noticed something. The aliens were being careful not to damage her. They wanted her alive and unhurt. That gave her an idea. Maybe being captured was not the end. Maybe it was just the beginning of a different kind of fight. One of the aliens came forward with metal restraints. They looked like handcuffs, but bigger and with small lights on them. Yuna let them put the restraints on her wrists and ankles. The metal was cold and heavy, but she could still move a little. The aliens led her through the metal tube into their ship. The inside was dark and warm and smelled like metal, and something else she could not identify. The walls had strange patterns cut into them, and the lights were red instead of white, like human ships used. They walked through many corridors. All the aliens they passed stopped to look at her. Some made clicking sounds when they saw her. Others just stared with their yellow eyes. She tried to remember the path they took, but there were too many turns and everything looked the same. Finally, they reached a large room filled with cages. Different alien creatures were trapped in the cages. Some she recognized from other worlds, but many she had never seen before. All of them looked scared and tired. Some had been hurt. The Vorthak put Yuna in an empty cage. The bars were thick metal and there was no way to break them. A bowl of water and some kind of food were already inside. The food smelled bad, but the water looked clean. She was hungry and thirsty from the fight, but she did not want to eat alien food. The leader alien came to her cage and looked at her again. Human specimen 4,847, he said, reading from a small device. You will be transported to main research facility tomorrow. Rest now. Soon you will help us learn many things about human species. He walked away, leaving Yuna alone in the cage. She looked around at the other prisoners. Some of them tried to talk to her, but she did not understand their languages. One creature that looked like a big blue cat made sad sounds and pointed at its empty cage next to hers. Yuna sat down on the hard floor of her cage and started to think. The aliens thought they had won by capturing her. They thought she was just another specimen for their experiments. But they did not know about human stubbornness. They did not know that humans were most dangerous. When they had nothing left to lose, she started to study everything around her. The guards, and when they changed shifts, the way the cages were locked, the sounds the ship made as it flew through space. Every detail might be important later. The other prisoners had given up hope. She could see it in their eyes. But Yuna Kim was not like the other prisoners. She was a human, and humans did not give up. They adapted. They survived. And when the time was right, they fought back harder than anyone expected. The Vorthak had made their first mistake by keeping her alive. Soon they would learn it would also be their last. The metal beam shot through the observation window like a missile launched from a cannon. 20 times Earth, gravity accelerated the 3-foot-long rod to incredible speed. The reinforced glass that was supposed to stop any prisoner attack shattered, like ice hit by a hammer doctor. Krim had exactly 1 second to look surprised before the beam struck him in the chest and drove him backward into the control console behind him. Sparks flew in all directions as alien technology exploded under the impact. The main power grid for the entire detention block flickered and went dark. Emergency lighting came on bathing, everything in red. Emergency alarms started screaming throughout the facility. Computer voices in the alien language announced containment. Breach in Block 7. Level 12. All the careful security systems that kept prisoners locked up began to fail. Yuna felt the gravity in her cell drop to almost zero as the damaged control systems went crazy. Without proper regulation, the gravitational fields throughout the detention block started fluctuating wildly. Some cells had crushing gravity, others had none at all. She pushed off from the wall and dove through the broken observation window, landing in the control room among the wreckage of alien equipment and Dr. Krim's body. The alien scientist was still alive, but badly hurt. Blood that looked purple instead of red was pooling under him. Where are the other human prisoners? Yuna asked, grabbing Dr. Krim by his white coat. Alien coughed up more purple blood and tried to speak. Level 15, he whispered. Block 9. All humans kept together for comparison studies. Yuna looked around the control room at all the broken equipment. The aliens had built this place to be escape-proof, but they had not planned for someone who could turn their own technology into a weapon. She began systematically destroying every control panel she could find. Each punch landed with incredible force as the malfunctioning gravity systems caused random spikes throughout the room. Sometimes she hit with normal strength, sometimes with the power of 10 people. The alien equipment was not built to survive that kind of damage. Through the broken window, she could see other cells where the gravity, torture had stopped working. Prisoners who had been crushed against the floor were now floating freely. Some looked dead, but others were starting to move. Many different alien species were trapped here, and they all had one thing in common. They hated the Vorthak. The facility security forces were trying to respond to the emergency, but they could not function in the chaotic gravitational conditions. Guards in heavy armor found themselves floating helplessly when gravity disappeared or crushed against walls when it spiked. Randomly, Commander Zek led a squad of elite guards toward Block 7, but they moved slowly and carefully. Their armor was designed for normal conditions, not for gravity that changed every few seconds. One guard stepped into a high-gravity zone and was slammed face-first into the floor hard enough to crack. His helmet, Yuna, was already moving through the facility using her knowledge of the layout she had memorized during transport. The aliens had made another mistake by letting her see their prison design. Now she used that knowledge to avoid the security teams and find what she was looking for. The armory was located on level 10 near the main guard station. She reached it by crawling through maintenance passages, where the gravity was more stable. The security locks had failed when the power grid was damaged. All the weapons and equipment stored here were now available to anyone brave enough to take them. Inside the armory, she found something that made her smile for the first time since her capture. Her original combat suit and plasma rifle were stored in a display case marked Human Military Equipment. The Vorthak had kept her gear as trophies, never imagining she would get it back. The combat suit was designed for use in variable gravity conditions. Its internal stabilizers automatically adjusted to keep the wearer balanced and mobile, no matter what the local gravity field was doing. As soon as Yuna sealed herself into the familiar armor, she felt truly dangerous again. The suit systems came online and immediately began compensating for the chaotic gravitational fields. She could now move normally while the alien guards stumbled and fell around her. The plasma rifle powered up with a familiar hum that meant death to anyone who stood in her way. She made her way toward level 15, where the other human prisoners were being held. The corridors were full of confused guards and escaped prisoners from other species. Some aliens were fighting each other. Others were trying to restore order, but most were just trying to survive in the gravitational chaos. A group of guards spotted her and opened fire, but their aim was terrible in the shifting gravity. Their energy bolts went wild, hitting walls and ceiling instead of their target. Yuna's return fire was perfectly accurate thanks to her suit stabilizers. 3 guards dropped before the others realized they were outmatched. The main elevator was not working because of power failures, but Yuna had trained for this kind of situation. She used her suit's strength enhancement to climb up the elevator shaft 5 levels, moving hand over hand along the cable guides. Level 15 was worse than the other detention areas. This was where the Vorthak kept prisoners they considered most valuable for research. The cells were smaller, and the security was tighter. But security meant nothing when the gravity control system was destroying itself. She found Block 9 and saw what the aliens had been doing to human prisoners. 12 people from her home world were locked in cells barely big enough to stand in. Some had been there for months, based on how thin and pale they looked. Others showed signs of medical experiments. Cell locks were electronic and connected to the main power grid that was now failing. Yuna used her plasma rifle to cut through the lock mechanisms one by one. As each door opened, another human prisoner staggered out into the corridor. Some were too weak to fight. but others still had strength left. One was a sergeant from the Marine Corps who recognized Yuna's uniform captain. "Where the hell are we? And how do we get out?" "We are on the Vorthak home world," Yuna replied. "We get out by making them. Regret they ever heard of humans." The sergeant grinned, despite their terrible situation. "Sounds like a plan, Captain. What do you need us to do?" Yuna looked at the group of freed prisoners and the chaos erupting throughout the facility the aliens had made their final mistake by keeping humans together in one place. They had created a concentrated group of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and now that group was free and angry. It was time to show the Vorthak what humans did when they had nothing left to lose. The detention facility descended into complete madness as gravitational fields ran wild throughout the massive complex. Yuna led her group of freed human prisoners through corridors where gravity changed without warning. In some areas they floated. Like astronauts in others, they were crushed against walls by invisible forces, but humans adapted faster than other species. While alien guards struggled to move in their heavy armor, the human prisoners learned to use the chaos to their advantage. They moved in quick bursts, timing their movements to the gravitational fluctuations, like surfers riding dangerous waves. Sergeant Pack was the first to understand what Yuna had done. "How did you turn their torture device into a weapon?" he asked, as they climbed through a maintenance shaft where gravity pulled sideways instead of down physics. Yuna replied, "Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. They taught me to survive in variable gravity, so I used their own system to launch a projectile at them." The other freed prisoners were soldiers, scientists and engineers who had been captured during various battles against the Vorthak Empire. As they moved through the facility, they began working together like the trained professionals they were. Each person had skills that helped the group survive. Dr. Han had been a prisoner for 6 months and knew the layout of the medical research areas. "There are more humans in the experimental labs. She said they were using us to test new weapons. And drugs. Lieutenant Choi had been captured only 2 weeks ago and still had current intelligence on Vorthak military procedures. Their command structure relies on constant communication," he explained. "When we cut their communications, they will not be able to coordinate a response." The group moved through the facility like a military unit, because that is exactly what they were. These were not helpless victims anymore. They were human soldiers operating behind enemy lines, and they were very good at their job. Emergency response teams tried to reach the areas where gravity was most unstable, but they could not function in the chaotic conditions. Commander Zek ordered his guards to seal off entire sections of the facility and wait for the gravitational fields to stabilize. That was exactly what Yuna had hoped he would do. By sealing off sections, they were trapping themselves in small groups that could be defeated one by one. The humans moved through maintenance passages and service, tunnels that the aliens had not thought to seal. In the medical research section, they found 20 more human prisoners. Some were unconscious from alien experiments. Others were too sick to move, but all of them were alive. Dr. Han began treating the worst cases while the soldiers searched for more weapons and equipment. The facility armory was heavily guarded, but the guards could not aim properly in the shifting gravity. Yuna and Lieutenant Choi attacked from opposite directions using the gravitational chaos to confuse their enemies. Energy bolts flew wild while human weapons found their targets with deadly accuracy. Inside the armory, they found enough weapons to equip a small army. Not just human equipment, but alien weapons that had been captured from other species. Some of the humans had training on alien technology from previous battles. They quickly figured out how to use the strange weapons. The freed prisoners were becoming an army, and they were getting stronger with. Each passing hour, more prison blocks were failing as the gravitational control system continued to malfunction. Prisoners from dozens of different worlds were breaking free and joining the fight against their captors. But the humans were the most organized and effective fighters. They had military training and discipline that other species lacked. They began leading groups of escaped prisoners in coordinated attacks on guard stations and command centers. General Rax arrived at the facility with reinforcements from the planetary garrison, but found his troops could not enter the affected areas. The gravitational chaos was too dangerous for normal military operations. His heavy tanks and armored vehicles were useless when gravity could crush them or send them floating into walls. We need to evacuate the facility and use orbital bombardment to destroy it, General Rax told his staff. This situation is beyond conventional military response. But his communications officer reported a new problem. Sir, we are receiving distress calls from detention facilities on 3 other worlds. Similar gravitational failures are being reported. The humans seem to have shared information about exploiting our prison systems. The escape was spreading throughout the Vorthak Empire. Other human prisoners had learned from Yuna's example and were turning gravity cells into weapons on multiple worlds. The aliens were facing a coordinated prison break across their territory. Yuna received this news through captured alien communication equipment. The human prisoners had become something the Vorthak had never faced before, a coordinated resistance movement that was spreading faster than they could contain it, standing in the main control center of the detention facility, surrounded by the wreckage of alien technology and the bodies of guards who had underestimated human determination. Yuna realized they had achieved something impossible. They had turned the most secure prison in Vorthak, space, into a weapon against the Empire itself. The gravitational chaos was now permanent. The control systems were too damaged to repair, and the facility was becoming uninhabitable even for the aliens. The Vorthak would have to abandon their most important research center and all the valuable prisoners it contained. More importantly, they had proven that humans could not be broken by torture or imprisonment. They could only be made more dangerous. The other species in the galaxy were watching, and learning human resilience was becoming a symbol of hope for everyone who had suffered under Vorthak rule. But Yuna knew this was just the beginning. The real fight was still ahead of them. They had weapons now, and allies, and most importantly, they had shown that the Vorthak Empire could be beaten. The aliens who had seemed invincible were actually vulnerable to the one thing they had never understood: human ingenuity combined with the refusal to surrender even when everything seemed hopeless. The Vorthak had made the mistake of trying to study humans like laboratory animals. Instead, they had created an army of enemies who knew exactly how dangerous they could be when they had nothing left to lose. The final battle for the detention facility began at dawn, when General Rax decided to retake the prison using overwhelming force. He brought 3 battalions of elite Vorthak troops armed with the most advanced weapons in their arsenal. They surrounded the facility and prepared to assault every entrance simultaneously. But the humans and their alien allies were ready. They had spent hours preparing defenses, using the chaotic gravity fields as weapons. The corridors had become death traps where attackers would suddenly find themselves crushed against walls or floating helplessly, while defenders picked them off. Yuna stood in the main control center coordinating the defense through captured communication systems. Around her were freed prisoners From a dozen different worlds, all working together under human leadership, the Vorthak had unknowingly created exactly what they feared most: a unified resistance. The first assault wave tried to breach the main entrance, but found themselves unable. To advance through corridors where gravity changed every few seconds, heavy armor that normally protected soldiers became a liability when they could not predict which direction the gravitational force would pull them. Lieutenant Choi had rigged explosive charges throughout the facility using alien demolition equipment. When Vorthak troops tried to advance through certain passages, the explosions would trigger gravitational spikes that crushed entire squads. The aliens were being killed. By their own technology, Dr. Han had found the facility's medical research data and discovered something that changed everything. The Vorthak had been experimenting on humans, not just for scientific knowledge, but because they were afraid. Human, physical, and mental capabilities were far beyond what the aliens had initially believed. "We are not just another species they want to study," Dr. Han told Yuna as she uploaded the research files to their communication systems. "We are the species they fear most. That is why they built these prisons. That is why they try so hard to break us psychologically." The research data showed that humans had higher gravity tolerance, faster healing, better problem-solving abilities, and most importantly, much greater resistance to psychological torture than any other known species. The Vorthak had been trying to find ways to control humans because they knew that in a fair fight, humans would win. General Rax received reports that made his blood run cold. The human prisoners were not just defending themselves, they were actively hunting his troops. Small groups of humans were moving through areas where his soldiers could not go, using the gravitational chaos to launch surprise attacks. Every time his forces tried to establish a secure position, the humans would find a way to disrupt it. They seemed to understand the damaged facility better than his own engineers. They moved through areas his troops considered impassable and struck where he least expected. The communication systems throughout the facility had been hijacked and now broadcast a message that was being received across multiple star systems. "This is Captain Yuna Kim of the Human Defense Corps speaking to all Vorthak forces. Your detention facility has fallen. Your prisoners are free. Your empire is not as strong as you believed." The message continued with tactical information about Vorthak weaknesses that the human prisoners had discovered during their captivity. Other worlds that had been conquered by the Empire began receiving detailed intelligence about how to fight back effectively. By midday, General Rax realized his assault had failed. His troops were trapped in a facility that had become a three-dimensional battlefield where the laws of physics worked against them. The humans had somehow turned a prison into an impregnable fortress. He ordered a full retreat, but found that many of his soldiers could not escape. The gravitational fields had become so unstable that large sections of the facility were completely inaccessible. His trapped troops were forced to surrender to the human-led resistance. As Vorthak forces pulled back from the detention facility, rescue ships from the Human Defense Corps began arriving. Admiral Park led a fleet of 12 vessels that had responded to Yuna's broadcast. They found the prison in complete chaos, but firmly under human control. The sight that greeted the rescue teams was unprecedented. Thousands of freed prisoners from dozens of different species were working together under human command. They had not just escaped, they had captured the facility and turned it into a base for further operations against the Vorthak Empire. Captain Kim Admiral Park said as he met Yuna in the wrecked control center. Your escape from this facility has triggered uprisings on 17 different worlds. The entire Vorthak prison system is collapsing. Yuna looked out through the broken observation windows at the facility that had been meant to break her spirit. Instead, it had become the birthplace of a revolution that was spreading across the galaxy. The aliens had tried to study human nature and had learned too late what it really meant. "Sir," she said, standing at attention. Despite her torn and bloodied combat suit, they made a critical error in judgment. They assumed that what breaks other species would break humans. They gave me 3 days to study their systems while believing they were torturing me. The liberation of the detention facility became the turning point in the war against the Vorthak Empire. Word spread throughout known space about the human who had turned a gravity cell into a weapon in 3 minutes, and then led a successful prison. Revolt against impossible odds. Other species began to understand that humans represented something new in galactic politics. They were not just another conquerable race, they were natural leaders who became more dangerous when cornered. The Vorthak Empire found itself facing rebellions on every world where humans had been imprisoned. The research data recovered from the facility revealed the true scope of Vorthak fears. They had been preparing for a potential war against humanity for over a decade, building weapons and prisons specifically designed to contain human capabilities. But their preparations had only made humans more dangerous. Captain Yuna Kim returned to active duty, but her legend lived on throughout the galaxy. The story was told on 1,000 worlds of the human who was locked in a gravity cell and turned it into a weapon in 3 minutes. It became a symbol of hope for oppressed peoples everywhere. The Vorthak Empire never recovered from the mass prison breaks that followed Yuna's escape. Their entire system of control through intimidation and torture collapsed when they could no longer guarantee that their prisons would hold their enemies. The fear they had used to control others turned against them years later. When military historians studied the fall of the Vorthak Empire, they would identify Yuna's escape as the single most important event in the war. But they would also note that it was not the escape itself that mattered. It was what the escape proved about human nature. Humans, when pushed to their absolute limits, did not break. They adapted, they overcame, and they made their enemies deeply regret ever underestimating what Earth's children could accomplish when they had nothing left to lose, except their determination to survive and fight back. The galaxy learned that day that there were some cages strong enough to hold a human body, but no cage ever built could contain the human spirit. When that spirit was finally unleashed, it burned bright enough to topple empires and free worlds. And it all began with one human woman who refused to be broken by a gravity cell and instead turned it into the weapon that would destroy those who had dared to cage her.